The autumn wind was whipping fallen leaves across the yard of my Westfield home as I tried once again to overcome my cursed arthritis while working on a new jewelry box. My fingers, once nimble and strong, now often failed me, but I persevered with my tools. It was my salvation, my refuge. My name is Silas Hampton. I'm 68 years old, and I've spent my life creating beauty out of wood. The workshop in my backyard was my kingdom. Small but perfectly organized, with windows facing east so the morning light would fall on the work table. The smell of fresh sawdust and linseed oil with which I coated my finished products had been a familiar smell to me since childhood. My grandfather started with simple carpentry. My father continued the business, and I brought it to the level of art. At least that's what my Evelyn said. Evelyn, it's been 2 years since she left, but every morning I woke up with the feeling that she had just gone into the kitchen to make tea. 42 years together, almost half a century hand in hand. She always understood my craft, appreciated it. I remember her sitting on the doorstep of the workshop with embroidery in her hands while I worked on some order. In those moments, there was a tacit understanding between us that required no words. "Show me what kind of beauty is being born today," she would ask as I pulled a particularly valuable piece of wood from the closet. I pulled cherry planks for jewelry boxes, maple for dining tables, ash for chairs, and oak for solid cabinets. And sometimes I let myself work with exotic species I'd collected over the years. Purple heart from the Amazon jungle, ebony from Africa, zebrano with a striped texture reminiscent of zebra skin. Evelyn marveled at every pattern, every texture. Now my collection dusted in a special cabinet in the corner of the workshop. I still bought samples of rare breeds, but more out of habit. After Evelyn left, something inside me snapped. The world had lost its colors, and even the most beautiful wood did not evoke the same awe. But worst of all, I was left alone with my son. Our only child, Adrian, had never shared my passion for woodworking. He grew up unlike me or his mother, a cold, calculating man who was always looking for fast money and easy decisions. He worked in corporate finance, considering my trade a relic of the past. "You could open a shop and hire workers," he told me as a child, "stamp furniture on a stream, and make real money, not pennies for exclusive countertops." He never realized that money was only a consequence, not the goal of my work. I was making enough. Our family was never in need. The Victorian house on a quiet Westfield street that Evelyn and I bought when we were young was fully paid off. We had savings. My carpentry shop brought in a steady income. Many connoisseurs across the country ordered furniture and decorative pieces from me. I even did some restoration work for the local museum. "Dad, don't you think it's time to stop with this, amateur hour?" Aiden asked one day, arriving with his wife Nancy for Sunday dinner 3 months after Evelyn's funeral. Nancy, a petite woman with a keen eye, nodded in agreement beside him. "You're 66 now and your hands are a mess. You'll saw something off again. Who's going to take care of you?" "I've been working with tools longer than you've been alive," I replied, trying not to show offense. "And I'm going to keep at it as long as I can hold a planer." "Stubbornness runs in the family," Nancy sighed, addressing her husband as if I weren't there. "My father was the same way, remember? He refused to move into a nursing home until he broke his hip. That's when I felt the first signs of the storm coming. They looked at me not as a living person with their own desires and rights, but as a problem to be solved. But I didn't give it much thought, writing it off as their concern, albeit expressed clumsily. As the weeks went by, Aiden and Nancy's visits became more frequent. They always came on some pretext, to bring groceries, to check on me, to help me with household chores, to help me clean. Gradually, their concern became more and more intrusive. One day I found Nancy going through my papers in my office. "What are you doing?" I asked, standing in the doorway. "Oh, Silas, you scared me," she laughed nervously. "I'm just helping you organize your papers. It's been such a mess since Evelyn died. Aiden and I are worried that you'll forget to pay your bills or lose something important." I knew exactly where everything was. Evelyn always did the paperwork, but after she died, I quickly mastered that side of life. Paid my bills on time, kept the house in order, kept working on orders. Yes, sometimes I forgot to eat or stayed up late at night in the shop, but it was my way of coping with grief, not a sign of incapacity. "I've got it under control," I said firmly. "Thank you for your concern, but I'm doing fine." Shistun. Of course, Nancy smiled, but her eyes remained cold. We just want to help. The next day, Aiden arrived with some papers. Dad, Nancy and I thought it would be easier for you if I became your financial representative. Just in case, just to help with paying bills and stuff. I picked up the paperwork and read it carefully. It was a power of attorney, giving Aiden full control over my finances. I'm not signing this, I said firmly, handing the papers back to him. I have no problem managing my own money. Dad, don't be so stubborn. Aiden sounded annoyed. It's just a normal precaution. What if you get sick? What if something happens? Who's going to deal with all of this? If something happens, then we'll deal with it, I said. In the meantime, I'm in my right mind. After that incident, our relationship became strained. Aiden and Nancy kept coming back, but now with obvious displeasure. They no longer hid their frustration with my stubbornness. And one day I overheard them talking in the kitchen when they thought I was in the workshop. The house is worth at least $500,000, Aiden said. And then he's spending the money on some wood instead of living like a normal pensioner. Maybe we should consult a lawyer, Nancy suggested. See if we can get a guardianship because of his, weirdness. I mean, he talks to this furniture all day long, like it's alive. And the other day I found a bill for a $3,000 piece of rare wood. $3,000 for a piece of wood. That's crazy. My heart ached. I never thought my own son would make plans for my property while I was still alive. And it wasn't even about the money. What hurt me was how dismissive they were of my life's work, my craft, my values. I sat in the workshop for a long time that evening, stroking the polished surface of a dresser I had custom made for a couple from a neighboring town. It was made of red oak with maple inlay, a simple but elegant design that I had developed with Evelyn shortly before her illness. This dresser was to be a gift for the customer's 50th wedding anniversary. Half a century together, 5 more years than Evelyn and I had been fated to spend together. What am I going to do, Evie? I whispered, imagining her sitting next to me, just like in the old days. Our boy had become a stranger. Over the next few days, the situation only got worse. Aiden started coming into the workshop and looking at my collection of rare woods, tools, finished pieces. He was taking notes on his phone, taking pictures. What are you doing? I finally asked. I'm making an inventory. He didn't hide it. I want to know how much it's worth. Why? For insurance, he lied, not looking me in the eye. Besides, Dad, don't you think it's time to sell it all off? Make some room. Maybe move into a smaller apartment. This is my house, I reminded him, and my workshop. Yeah, but you're here alone in 4 bedrooms. It's unsustainable. Nancy and I think you'd be better off in an apartment. No stairs, no gardening. I was silent, trying to control my anger. Aiden took my silence as agreement and continued. And then, those tools, the wood collection, it's all worth money that could be invested in your future. A good nursing home, for example. I'm 68, not 98, I said through gritted teeth. And I'm not going anywhere. Aiden pressed his lips together. You can't live in the past forever, Dad. Mom would want you to move on. Mentioning Evelyn in the context of his self-serving plans was the last straw. I pointed to the door. Go away. Now. Dad, don't be a baby. Go away, Aiden. I want to be alone. He left, slamming the workshop door so hard that a can of nails fell from the shelf. Picking them up off the floor, I could feel my hands shaking, not from arthritis, but from impotent rage and bitterness. In that moment, I realized that my son saw me not as a person, but as an obstacle between him and the home he already considered his own. For the next few days, I avoided contact with Aiden and Nancy, locking myself in the workshop when they came over. They'd knock on the door, but I wouldn't answer, pretending not to hear over the noise of the tools. A week later, Aiden used a new tactic. He brought the keys to the house. Nancy and I have decided that we're going to live with you for a while, he announced over dinner, which I had to join since they'd brought food from the restaurant. You need help, and we're here to take care of you. I'm fine, I objected. I don't need a babysitter. Dad, you don't notice how much you've changed since Mom died, Aiden said in the tone of a patient parent explaining something to a cranky child. You don't leave the house much. You spend all day fiddling with wood, talking to yourself. I'm working, I interrupted him, doing what I do best, But why? Nancy intervened. At your age, it's time to relax, enjoy life. Travel, maybe. Why work yourself to exhaustion? They didn't realize or didn't want to realize that my craft was not a job, but a way of life. Without it, I would be an empty shell, especially now that Evelyn was gone. The next morning, I discovered that Aiden and Nancy had indeed moved into the guest bedroom. They had brought suitcases of clothes, personal belongings, and 2 more days later, Nancy began to clean up the kitchen, rearranging everything to her liking. Aiden, meanwhile, removed Evelyn's pictures from the living room, declaring that too many reminders are bad for my mental health. I could feel the walls of the house I considered my sanctuary turning into a prison. Aiden and Nancy watched my every move, commented on every decision, every purchase. They began to control what I ate, when I went to bed, who I socialized with. This Peregrine Fox, your antique dealer buddy, Aiden said one day, looking through my phone, which I'd carelessly left on the table. He's called 3 times this week. What are you and him talking about for so long? That's my business, I replied, picking up my phone. And my friends are none of your business. Everything that concerns you concerns me, Aiden countered. I'm your son, and I'm responsible for you. I didn't ask you to take that responsibility, I said quietly, and I'm still in a position to decide who I want to hang out with. That night, lying in bed and looking up at the ceiling, I realized I couldn't live like that anymore. My home, my workshop, my tools, my wood collection, it was all part of me, my legacy. But now that legacy was threatened by my own son's greed. I remembered Evelyn's words to me shortly before she died. Don't let anyone take the joy of creativity away from you, Silas, even if that someone is our son. She always saw through Aiden, understood his nature better than I did. Maybe she saw what was happening now. Maybe she was trying to warn me. With these thoughts, I fell asleep, and in the morning I woke up with a clear plan of action. The first thing I did was to call my old friend Peregrine Fox. The rain drummed on the roof of the workshop, creating a soothing rhythm that usually helped me focus. But today, even that sound couldn't take away my anxiety. A week spent under the same roof as Aiden and Nancy had turned my house into a battlefield where I was slowly losing territory. The morning began as usual with my attempt to slip unnoticed into the kitchen, make coffee, and hide in the workshop before they woke up. But Nancy seemed to have an uncanny ability to sense my movements around the house. "Good morning, Silas," she sang, appearing in the kitchen in her pink robe. "I'll make you breakfast. What do you want? Oatmeal? Eggs?" Her concern sounded fake, like bad acting. I could see there was impatience and irritation behind the smiles and offers of help. "Thanks, but I'll just have coffee," I replied, already pouring myself a cup. "No, no," she gently but insistently took the mug from me. "You need to eat properly. Aiden has noticed that you've lost weight. We're worried about your health." I wanted to object, but decided it was a waste of energy. It was easier to eat the damn oatmeal and go to the workshop. "Okay," I agreed reluctantly. "Oatmeal is oatmeal." Nancy smiled triumphantly and started working on the stove. I sat at the table and stared out the window. The rain was getting heavier, blurring the outline of the old oak tree in the backyard. Evelyn loved that oak tree. We'd planted it the year Aiden was born, and now it towered over the house like a silent guardian. "Speaking of the workshop," Nancy began, stirring her oatmeal. Aiden and I were thinking, maybe it's time for a little renovation. It's so cramped, and there's so much old stuff in there. Maybe we should get rid of the junk we don't need. I tensed up, but kept my tone calm. There's no junk in my workshop. There are tools and materials that I use in my work. "Ah, but some of them look so old and rusty," she wrinkled her nose. "And these pieces of wood everywhere. I mean, they're just gathering dust." "Aiden says you could replace a lot of your tools with modern electric ones. It'll be easier and faster." "Aiden doesn't know anything about carpentry," I said, irritated. "Good wood takes years to season, and hand tools give you precision you can't get with electric tools." Nancy set a bowl of oatmeal in front of me, too runny and completely tasteless. "Still," she said, watching me eat reluctantly, "at your age, you shouldn't be working so hard. It's time to think about quieter hobbies." Footsteps sounded on the stairs, and a moment later, Aiden appeared in the kitchen, fresh and energetic, wearing a tracksuit. "Serum, good morning." He patted me on the shoulder with exaggerated cheerfulness. "How did you sleep, old man?" I hated it when he called me old man. It sounded like an insult in his mouth, like a reminder of my vulnerability that he was trying to use against me. Fine, I answered briefly. Great. I was thinking about doing your workshop today. Aiden poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down across from me. Going through the inventory, throwing out what wasn't being used, making room. I set the spoon aside, feeling the anger boiling up inside. Don't touch my workshop, I said quietly but firmly. Not a single tool, not a single board is going to disappear from there without my knowledge. Aiden and Nancy exchanged a glance, the same glance I'd already learned to recognize, the look of the parents of a naughty child. Dad, be reasonable, Aiden said slowly, as if explaining something to a slow learner. Your workshop is a breeding ground for dust and mold. There are tools lying around that you haven't used in years. Why keep all that junk? It's not junk, my voice shook with restrained rage. This is my life, my history. Some of these instruments are over 100 years old. They belong to my grandfather and father. Exactly, Nancy picked up on that. Sorna, they belong to the past, and we're thinking about your future. I got up from the table, leaving my oatmeal uneaten. My future is my business, and don't touch my workshop. This is my last warning. I walked out of the kitchen, feeling their stares in my back. The rain intensified, and I decided I wouldn't go to the workshop today. It was too risky to leave them alone in the house. Instead, I went up to my bedroom, retrieved from a hiding place in the floor the key to the safe hidden in the wall closet, and checked the contents. The deeds to the house, the insurance policies, the will, everything was there. I added a few pictures of Evelyn that I didn't want Aiden to throw away, and locked the safe again. I spent the rest of the day in tense anticipation. Aiden came to the door of my room several times, but I pretended to be asleep. By late afternoon, the rain had stopped and I decided to check the workshop. To my relief, the door was locked, and when I entered, everything was still intact. My tools, from the antique planer that had been passed down in our family since 1899 to the modern wood carvers, and lay in their places. The collection of wood, from the usual oak and maple to exotic species from around the world, was intact. I ran my hand over the rough surface of the unfinished dresser. Work on it had been slow because of my arthritis, but I wasn't in a hurry. Carpentry is all about patience and precision. That was what made my craft different from the cheap factory furniture that littered Aiden's apartment in the city. The next morning, Aiden brought up the subject of the workshop again, but from a different angle. I found a great woodworking course, he said, showing me a page on his phone. Modern techniques, new materials. Maybe you should try it. You'll learn something new, meet people. I have my own technique, I replied dryly, and I don't need new acquaintances. That's the problem. Aiden suddenly raised his voice. You've shut yourself off from the real world. It's not healthy, Dad. You need to get out of the house, socialize, grow. I socialize with who I want to socialize with, I argued, and I'm evolving as I see fit. Aiden rolled his eyes, a gesture I remembered from his teenage years. A gesture that always meant, my father is hopeless. You know what? He said after a pause. Nancy and I have been talking, and we've decided that we're not staying here for a while, but for good. I froze, not believing my ears. What? We're moving in with you, Aiden repeated. For good. We'll rent out the apartment in the city. We'll look after you, help you with the house. It's a big house, plenty of room for everyone. But I didn't ask you to move. My voice sounded muffled with shock. I'm doing fine on my own. It's out of the question, Dad, Aiden patted my shoulder. The decision's been made. Nancy and I had already started packing up the city apartment. At that moment, I realized I was losing not only my freedom, but my home as well. They were taking over the territory little by little, step by step, and soon I would be a guest in my own home. That evening, after Aiden and Nancy had gone into town to get their things, I finally called Peregrine Fox. We'd been friends with him for over 30 years. Peregrine owned an antique store in downtown Westfield, and we met when he commissioned me to restore an antique bureau. From then on, our friendship only grew stronger. Peregrine was one of the few people who truly appreciated my craft. Peregrine, it's Silas, I said when he picked up the phone. We need to talk. Can you come over? An hour later, we were sitting in my workshop. I brewed a strong tea. Peregrine always preferred it to coffee. My friend was a thin man with piercing blue eyes and a lock of gray hair gathered in a ponytail. Despite his age, he was 72, he remained energetic and sharp-tongued. "So, tell me what happened," he said, sipping his tea. "Judging by your voice on the phone, it's serious." I told him everything. How Aiden and Nancy had gradually taken over my house. How they tried to control every aspect of my life. How they planned to modernize my workshop and throw out my old tools. And finally, about their decision to move out for good. Peregrine listened attentively without interrupting. When I finished, he was silent for a long time, tapping his fingers on his cup. "You know what I see?" he said at last. "A classic case of psychological abuse and financial control. They want to make you feel inferior, dependent, so they can get control of your assets." "But he's my son," I objected weakly. "He's probably just worried." "Stop it," Peregrine cut me off. "Don't make excuses for him. If he really cared about you, he'd respect your wishes and boundaries. But instead, he's acting like you're already incapacitated. It's manipulation, Silas. Pure manipulation." I sighed. Deep down, I knew he was right, but it hurt to admit it. What am I supposed to do? This is my home. I don't want to leave. But living with them, under the same roof. "Who says you have to leave?" Peregrine raised an eyebrow. "This house is yours. You can just ask them to move out." "Alruan, you don't know them," I shook my head. "They won't leave willingly. Aiden's stubborn as a bull, always has been, and Nancy's no better." "Then you have two choices." Peregrine set his cup down and leaned forward. "One, you go to a lawyer, tell him what the situation is, and he helps you legally protect your rights. It's going to be long, expensive, and messy. Two, you do something drastic, something that will completely change the situation." "Like what?" "Like selling the house," Peregrine smiled, seeing my amazement. "Think about it. If the house is gone, there will be no fight for it. You'll get the money, buy yourself another place, maybe smaller but cozy with a workshop, and start a new life without your toxic son and his wife." The idea seemed crazy to me. Selling the house Evelyn and I had lived in all our lives, the house where Aiden was born and raised, the house filled with memories. "I can't," I whispered. "This house, it's a part of me." "No, Silas," Peregrine shook his head. "The house is just walls and a roof. Your memories, your craft, your soul, that's what's really part of you. And all of that you can take with you wherever you go. And your memories of Evelyn will always be with you, no matter where you live," I wondered. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was too attached to material things, to walls that were, after all, just walls. "But where would I go?" I asked. "And what would happen to my workshop, to my tools?" "The tools could be moved. The workshop can be set up in a new place. And as for where to go," Peregrine squinted. "I have a friend who's selling a small house on the outskirts of Westfield, with a nice plot of land where you could put up a separate workshop, and the price is reasonable." "But selling a house takes time," I objected. "Aiden and Nancy are moving now." "Not necessarily." Peregrine pulled his cell phone out of his pocket. "I know a realtor, Irma Bancroft. She specializes in quick deals. If the house is in good condition and the price is right, she can find a buyer in a week." I hesitated. The thought of selling the house felt like a betrayal to Evelyn, to our life together. But on the other hand, wasn't it a betrayal to the way Aiden had treated me? The way he tried to drive me out of my own home, to destroy everything I cared about? "Let's at least meet this Irma," Peregrine suggested, seeing my hesitation. "Just talk, see what the options are. You're not risking anything." I nodded, feeling something shift inside me. Perhaps it was determination. Maybe it was desperation. But I knew I couldn't keep living like this. The next day, when Aiden left for work and Nancy went shopping, Peregrine arrived with Irma Bancroft, an energetic woman in her 50s with a short haircut and a penetrating gaze. Irma walked around the house, taking notes and photographs. She assessed the condition of the roof, the foundation, the utilities. She lingered especially long in my workshop, admiring the tools and finished products. "You're a real craftsman, Mr. Hampton," she said, running her hand over the surface of an unfinished dresser. "Such quality workmanship is rare these days." After the inspection, we sat down in the living room, and Irma gave her opinion. The house is in excellent condition, Mr. Hampton. Considering the neighborhood and the size of the lot, I think we can ask about 600,000. That's a reasonable price that will allow us to find a buyer quickly. How fast, I asked. If we put the house on the market tomorrow, I can organize showings this weekend. With luck, the first offers will come in by Monday. If you're happy with the price, we can close the deal in 2 weeks. 2 weeks? I couldn't believe it. That fast? With a motivated buyer, yes. Irma nodded. Of course, there's paperwork, inspections, but it can all be expedited. The key is to find the right buyer. I looked at Peregrine. He nodded encouragingly. And what do I need to do? I asked. First, you have to sign a contract with me so I can represent you. Irma pulled a folder of documents out of her briefcase. Then we'll take professional photos of the house, prepare a description, and I'll start looking for buyers from my client base. At the same time, we can look for a new place for you to live. Peregrine mentioned that you need a house with a workshop. I picked up the paperwork and started reading. The contract was standard, but I had a question. What about my son? He and his wife live here now. They shouldn't know about the sale until the last moment. Irma looked at Peregrine. That makes it difficult, but it doesn't make it impossible. We can arrange showings when they're not home, and you can sign the papers in my office. But I must warn you, sooner or later they'll find out. Maybe they'll see a "for sale" sign on the lawn or notice strangers looking at the house. I understand. I nodded, sounding stern. But the later they know, the better. In that case, I suggest we act quickly and discreetly. Irma smiled. I'll show the house to a few serious buyers without advertising it widely. This will increase the chances of a quick sale and minimize the risk of disclosure. I signed the contract, feeling my heart pounding with excitement and fear. It was a big step, perhaps the boldest I had ever taken in my entire life. But for the first time in a long time, I felt in control, that I had a plan of action. When Irma left, Peregrine lingered. Are you sure you're ready for this? He asked. No, I answered honestly. But I'm certainly not ready to live under the same roof as Aiden and Nancy, watching them destroy everything I hold dear. If selling the house is the price of my freedom, I'm willing to pay it. Peregrine shook my hand firmly. You're making the right choice, Silas. And remember, I'm always here for you. If you need help moving or just to talk, call me anytime. After he left, I sat in the living room for a long time, staring at the picture of Evelyn on the mantel, the only one Aiden had left behind. It showed her standing at that very window, lit by the morning sun, a cup of tea in her hands. It was our last wedding anniversary before she got sick. I hope you understand why I'm doing this, Evie, I whispered. I hope you would approve. In that moment, I thought the portrait smiled a little wider, as if she had actually heard me and was giving her blessing for this move. In the evening, Aiden and Nancy came back with the first batch of stuff from the city apartment. They were so busy discussing where to put their furniture and which rooms to remodel that they barely paid attention to me. And that was for the best. I was afraid they would notice my excitement and realize something was going on. At night, I lay awake, pondering the changes that were coming. The thought that soon this house would belong to someone else made me sad and afraid. But the thought that I would finally be free from my son's toxic control gave me hope and strength. The next morning, I called Irma to confirm the details, and she gave me the happy news. She already had potential buyers, a couple who had been looking for a house in this neighborhood for a long time. They'd be willing to come to the viewing the day after tomorrow when Aiden would be at work. The plan was starting to take shape, and I could feel the determination growing inside me to see it through. This was my chance at a new life, at freedom from toxic relationships, at preserving my craft and my dignity, and I wasn't going to let it go. The next few days passed in tense anticipation. I tried to behave as usual so as not to arouse Aiden and Nancy's suspicions. I made coffee in the morning, worked in the workshop in the afternoon, and read a book in the living room in the evening. But inside me, everything was boiling with excitement and fear. Irma Bancroft had kept her promise. The prospective buyers, the Reeves couple, toured the house while Aiden was at work and Nancy was shopping. They were delighted with the Victorian architecture, high ceilings, and wood paneling that I had restored myself a few years ago. They were especially impressed with the backyard with the century-old oak tree and my workshop. This is the perfect place for our daughter, Mrs. Reeves said as she looked at the workshop. She's an artist, dreaming of having her own studio. The thought of my studio becoming an art studio was strangely comforting. Better that than the gym Aiden had planned for it. 2 days after the inspection, Irma called with the news. The Reeveses were ready to buy the house at the asking price, with no strings attached. They even offered to expedite the process if possible. The deal could close in as little as a week. These are the perfect buyers, Irma said. They fell in love with your home and are willing to pay full cash. No mortgages, no additional inspections. I agreed, feeling both relieved and sad at the same time. The decision was made. There was no turning back. I was going to sell the house I had lived in for most of my conscious life, the house that had witnessed my happiness and grief, the birth of my son and the death of my wife. At the same time, Peregrine helped me find a new place to live, a small but cozy house on the outskirts of Westfield with a separate annex, perfect for a workshop. The price was reasonable, and after selling the current house, I still had a substantial sum left to live comfortably. Everything was going according to plan, but I couldn't shake the guilt. Not to Aiden, he'd chosen the path of manipulation and control, but to Evelyn. I felt like I was betraying our shared memory by leaving the home where we'd been so happy. The night before the sale papers were signed, I couldn't sleep for a long time. Leaving the bedroom, I walked quietly down the hallway, trying not to creak the floorboards. The house was asleep. Somewhere, the old clock that Evelyn loved so much was ticking. The full moon peeked through the kitchen window, casting a silvery glow on the familiar shape of the furniture I'd made with my own hands. I walked out into the backyard and approached the oak tree, its mighty branches spread over the house, protecting, shielding. Evelyn often sat under it in a wicker chair with a book or knitting. "There's a special energy here," she'd say, stroking the rough bark. "I'm sorry, Evie," I whispered, touching the tree. "I know you love this house, but I can't stay here anymore. Not with them." A light breeze blew through the leaves, creating a quiet rustle that somehow seemed comforting. It was as if she heard me and gave her blessing. In the morning, I drove to Irma's office and signed all the necessary paperwork. The deal was closed and the money was transferred to my account. The house was officially no longer mine. I had a week to pack up and leave. The hardest part was breaking the news to Aiden and Nancy. I got home for dinner. Aiden had taken the day off to help Nancy with moving the last of her things out of the city apartment. They sat in the kitchen, surrounded by boxes, discussing what rearrangements to make in the living room. "Your old leather couch needs to be thrown out," Nancy said, making notes in her notebook. "It doesn't fit in with the new decor I'm planning. In fact, it smells old." "Ah, this couch was your mother's favorite spot." I couldn't stand hearing those words. "And it stays where it is." They turned around, only now noticing me in the doorway. Nancy blushed slightly, caught by the unpleasant words, but quickly pulled herself together. "Silas, we're just discussing how to make the house more modern and comfortable for everyone," she said with a fake smile. "This couch is really very old and worn." "I don't think your opinion matters," I replied calmly, though I was seething with anger inside. "Considering you won't be living here in a week?" There was silence. Aiden and Nancy stared at me in bewilderment. "What do you mean?" Aiden finally asked. "Where are we going to go?" "The house is sold," I said simply. "The new owners move in a week. You have 7 days to pack your things and find another place to live." Nancy laughed as if I were joking, but Aiden looked at me carefully, trying to see if I was serious. "What the hell are you talking about?" he asked. "How could you sell the house? You didn't even talk to the realtors." "Irma Bancroft," I replied. "She's great. Found buyers in 3 days. Couple, very nice people. Their artist daughter is planning to set up a studio in my studio." Aiden's face showed a look of disbelief that turned to alarm when he realized I was serious. "That's impossible," he said, getting up from the table. "You couldn't sell the house without my knowledge." "Why not?" I looked him straight in the eye. "The house was in my name. I'm the sole owner. I don't need to ask anyone's permission to dispose of my property." "But you're out of your mind," shouted Aiden, losing control. "You're an old man with dementia who doesn't know what he's doing. Is that really what you think?" I remained calm, which seemed to irritate him even more. "Then why don't you go to court and prove I'm incapacitated?" Though it would be difficult, considering that I'd been medically examined a month ago and found to be completely sane. Aiden paled. He obviously hadn't expected this turn of events and didn't know what to say. Nancy, however, quickly came to her senses. "You can't do this to us," she said, shifting from shock to outrage. "We gave up everything for you. We gave up our apartment in the city. We moved our things." "I didn't ask you to do that," I said. "You made the decision to move here without asking my opinion. Just as you didn't ask my opinion about what to do with my tools, my workshop, my furniture. You invaded my life uninvited, tried to control my every move. Well, I've made my decision now, and it's non-negotiable." Aiden stared at me with growing rage. His hands clenched into fists, and for a moment I thought he was ready to hit me. But he held back, though his voice shook with anger. "You have no idea what you've done. It's crazy. Selling the house we all grew up in, the house my mom loved so much. Don't you dare talk about your mother." My voice became harsh. "You never understood what was really important to her. Evelyn didn't value walls, but the people inside them. She would never have approved of the way you treat me." "What are you talking about?" Aiden shook his hands. "We cared about you. We tried to help you. And you, that's a betrayal. You betrayed us all." "Betrayal?" I raised an eyebrow. "What about the fact that you and Nancy were discussing sending me to a nursing home and turning my workshop into a gym? How about the fact that you were planning to throw away the tools I inherited from my grandfather? How about the fact that you thought I was an incapacitated old man who shouldn't be in charge of my own money? That's the real betrayal, Aiden. A betrayal of the trust and love I've given you your whole life." There was silence in the kitchen. Aiden looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. Nancy shifted her gaze from me to her husband, clearly unsure of what to do. "How did you know about the nursing home?" Aiden finally asked. "I'm not deaf," I answered, "and I'm not blind. I saw you looking around my workshop with a tape measure. I've heard you talk about what kind of exercise equipment you're going to put in there. Saw the nursing home brochures Nancy left on the coffee table." Aiden turned to his wife with a mute question. She shrugged. "I thought he wouldn't notice them." "He doesn't notice much of anything these days." "I notice more than you think," I said. "And I'm still in charge of my life, even if you think otherwise." Aiden slumped back in his chair, suddenly losing all his anger. He looked lost and confused. "What now?" he asked. "Where are you going to go?" "I found a small house on the outskirts of town," I answered, "with an annex for a workshop. I'm moving in next week. What about me? What about us?" Aiden put his hand around the kitchen, as if trying to encompass the whole house. "What are we going to do?" "It's not my problem," I said harder than I meant to, but then I softened. "You can go back to your apartment in the city, or find a new place to live. You have a job, savings, you'll be fine." Nancy suddenly jumped up from her seat. "This is illegal," she shouted, waving her arms. "You can't sell the house without telling us. We'll sue. We'll contest the sale." "On what grounds?" I asked calmly. "The house was in my name. I have every right to sell it. The documents have been checked by lawyers. Everything is in order. We'll prove that you're incompetent." Nancy was furious. "That you didn't know what you were doing. That you were tricked into taking advantage of your senility." "You can try," I shrugged. "But keep in mind that before the sale I underwent a medical and psychological examination. The results are in order. And I have witnesses who will attest to my sanity and tell me how you tried to manipulate me and control my life." Aiden raised his hand, stopping his wife's tirade. "Wait, Nancy. Let's think about this. Maybe we can come to an agreement. Dad, how much did you get for the house?" "That's it. Now all he's interested in is money." $600,000, I said. Dash cash. It's already in my account." "How much is your new house worth?" Aiden continued, obviously calculating something in his mind. "That's none of your business," I said. "But if you're interested, don't expect an inheritance. I plan to spend all the money on myself traveling, buying rare woods, maybe even opening a small carpentry school. What's left over will go to charity." Aiden's face contorted with rage. You! He gasped with anger. "You crazy old man! Selfish and ungrateful. After all we've done for you. And what exactly have you done for me?" I asked, feeling my own anger building up inside. "Tried to take away my home? Humiliate me? treating me like an incompetent child, deprive me of my autonomy and dignity? If that's your concern, I'd rather do without it. Aiden jumped up so sharply that he knocked over a chair. You have 3 hours to get out of here, he shouted, pointing at the door. Pack your things and get out. Nancy and I are staying. This is our home now, and we're not going anywhere. I looked at my son, his face contorted with rage, and I didn't recognize the man I had once held in my arms, taught to ride a bike, supported in every endeavor. When and how had he turned into this alien, angry man? You don't understand, Aiden, I said quietly. I sold the house yesterday, so pack your things too. You fools don't even know that I sold the house yesterday, so pack your things too. They turned pale, finally realizing the reality of the situation. Nancy clutched the edge of the table as if she were suddenly sick. It can't be, she whispered. You're bluffing. I silently pulled the sale papers out of my pocket and placed them on the table. Aiden grabbed the papers and studied them frantically, as if hoping to find a catch, a loophole. These are the real papers, he said at last, looking up at me in shock. You really sold the house? Yesterday? That's right, I nodded, and you have exactly 1 week to pack up and move out. The new owners move in next Monday. But our apartment's been rented, Nancy exclaimed. We have no place to go. You can rent a temporary place to stay, I said, or stay in a hotel. With your income, it's not a problem. Aiden sat up suddenly and covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook, and for a moment I thought he was crying. But when he looked up, his eyes were not sadness, but cold fury. You'll regret this, he said quietly. I swear you will regret what you have done. Hardly, I answered. The only regret I already have is that I didn't do it sooner. Before I let you move in and take control of my life, Nancy suddenly jumped up and ran out of the kitchen. A moment later, I heard their bedroom door slam. Aiden remained seated, clutching the paperwork for the sale of the house in his hands. We'll contest the sale, he said, staring into the space in front of him. We'll get a lawyer, prove you were incompetent. You can try, I shrugged. But keep in mind that I've taped all your conversations about how you plan to put me in a nursing home and take over my property, and those recordings are easily admissible in court. It was a bluff. I didn't record their conversations, but from the way Aiden's pale, I think I hit the mark. You couldn't have, he whispered. I could, I said firmly, and I did. So think carefully before you start any more lawsuits. It could backfire on you. Aiden stood up, moving mechanically, like a robot. This isn't over, he said, heading for the door. We'll talk again. There's nothing more to talk about, I said. Just pack your things and go. The sooner the better for all of us. He stopped in the doorway and turned around. What about my baby stuff? My mom's pictures? Family heirlooms? You can have your personal belongings, I said. As for your mother's pictures and family heirlooms, I've already packed what I want to keep. You can have the rest. Aiden nodded and walked out without another word. I was left alone in the kitchen, feeling strangely empty. The confrontation I'd been dreading had happened, and I'd stood my ground. But there was no joy, only the bitterness of realizing how deep the gulf between me and my only son was. There was a tense silence in the house for the rest of the day. Aiden and Nancy locked themselves in their room, occasionally going only to the bathroom or the kitchen to fetch water. I could hear their muffled voices, but I couldn't make out the words. Most likely they were discussing their next steps, perhaps even planning a lawsuit, but I didn't care about that anymore. The main thing was done. The house was sold, the money was received, a new place was found. All that remained was to survive this week and start a new life. That evening, when I was about to go to bed, there was a knock on my bedroom door. It was Aiden, looking tired and aged. Can I come in? He asked quietly. I nodded, though I tensed up inwardly. What did he want? Another confrontation? Or maybe reconciliation? Aiden sat on the edge of the bed, not looking at me. Nancy and I discussed the situation, he said after a long pause. We decided not to contest the sale of the house. I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. Aiden sighed. But we have a condition. We want a portion of the money from the sale. Let's say a third. It's only fair. After all, the house was our home too. That's what it is. It's all about the money. It always has been. No, I said firmly. The house was in my name. I paid for it. I maintained it. The money from the sale belongs to me. But I'm your son, Aiden raised his voice. Your only child. You owe me an inheritance. I don't owe you anything, I said calmly, especially after you tried to take away my control over my own life. It was Nancy. He suddenly changed tactics. She's the one who insisted on the nursing home, on remodeling the workshop. I just wanted to be closer to you, to help you. Don't lie to me, Aiden. I shook my head. And don't betray your wife by blaming it on her. I know the idea of controlling my finances and sending me to a nursing home was yours. Nancy was just being supportive. He jumped up, losing control of himself again. What do you know? You've always been immersed in your woodwork, never interested in my life, my problems, and now you're depriving me of my inheritance. I was much more interested in your life than you think, I said quietly. It's just that you never appreciated it. You only cared about material things, money, status, and the carpentry that our family has practiced for 3 generations. You've always despised, called it fiddling with wood. You never understood what it means to create something with your own hands, to put your soul into the work. And I don't think you ever will. Aiden looked at me with undisguised dislike. You know what? He finally said it. Keep the damn money, choke on it, but don't come to me when you're alone and helpless in your new home, when you realize you can't manage without help. Don't worry, I replied. I'll find someone to help me around the house if I need it. Someone who won't try to control my every move and decide for me how to live my life. Aiden hummed and headed for the door. He turned around on the threshold. We'll leave tomorrow morning. I hope I never see you again. Likewise, I replied, feeling my heart clench with pain, despite all the hardness I tried to maintain. When the door closed behind him, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about how we'd gotten to this point, how my son, my only child, had turned into a stranger who only saw me as a source of money and trouble. And although I was sure of the correctness of my decision to sell the house, it was hard on my soul to realize that the family ties that should be the strongest were severed, perhaps forever. In the morning, I awoke to the sound of an engine. Looking out the window, I saw Aiden loading suitcases into the trunk of his car. Nancy was fussing nearby, constantly saying something to him. I could tell from their gestures that they were arguing. I didn't go out to say goodbye. Everything had already been said yesterday, and a new meeting would only bring more pain. I watched them get into the car, Aiden taking one last look at the house he'd grown up in as they drove away, kicking up a cloud of dust in the driveway. When the car was out of sight, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if the heavy weight I'd been carrying on my shoulders all these weeks was suddenly gone. The house was mine again, at least for the rest of the week. Even though I was going to be leaving soon, I could enjoy the peace and quiet now, without the constant scrutiny and manipulation. After Aiden and Nancy left, the house had become unaccustomedly quiet. I sat on the back porch finishing my coffee and watching the first rays of sunlight break through the leaves of the old oak tree. Strangely, instead of relief, I felt emptiness and a vague uneasiness, as if something important had been irretrievably lost. After finishing my coffee, I went to the workshop. I had the daunting task of packing up tools, materials, and unfinished projects for the move. 40 years of carpentry had to be packed into crates and boxes. It wasn't just a job. It was saying goodbye to an important part of my life. I started with the tools. Each planer, each chisel, each specialty chisel, I carefully wrapped in a soft cloth before placing it in the box. Some tools held the memory of 3 generations of Hampton's craftsmen. Here is my grandfather's planer, with his initials carved into the handle. And here is a set of specialty chisels my father received as a gift from a grateful client, an Italian count for whom he was restoring an antique cabinet. My own tools had a history too. I remembered where and when I bought each of them, what work I had done with them. There's the Japanese chisel I used to create delicate patterns on a jewelry box for Evelyn for our 30th anniversary. And here is a special hardwood planer I ordered from a craftsman in Germany 20 years ago. By noon, I had packed only a small portion of the tools. The process was slow, not only because of my thoroughness, but also because each item evoked memories, made me stop and dive into the past. The phone rang, snapping me out of my reverie. It was Peregrine. "How are you doing, old friend?" he asked without preamble. Have you told your domestic tyrants the news yet? Yes, I answered, sitting down on the workbench. Yesterday, they didn't take it well. Dash, dash, really, question mark. I could hear the irony in Peregrine's voice. What a surprise. And what did they do? Threaten to sue? Exactly, I chuckled involuntarily. Aiden had said something about proving my incapacity and challenging the deal. But then he changed tactics and tried to get some of the money from the sale out of me. Typical, Peregrine snorted. And what did you say? Sent him away, of course, I sighed. They left this morning. I think they're looking for a place to live and probably consulting lawyers. Let them try to do something about it, Peregrine said confidently. They have no legal grounds to challenge the sale. You own the house, you're legally competent. The deal was done according to the rules. They're just trying to scare you. I know. I rubbed the bridge of my nose. But it still hurts. Aiden's my only son. I was hoping that we could maintain some semblance of a normal relationship. After he tried to practically strip you of your freedom and property? Peregrine sounded distrustful. Silas, you're too soft. Always have been. Aiden grew up selfish and calculating precisely because you always let him have too much. There was a bitter truth in what he said. I had indeed always tried to give my son the best of everything, fulfilling his whims, turning a blind eye to the smallest of misdeeds. After Evelyn's death, I felt guilty for him, as if I had deprived him of his mother, though I rationally realized the absurdity of that thought. Perhaps that guilt kept me from seeing what he was really becoming. Anyway, Peregrine continued, I'm calling to offer to help with the move. I've made arrangements with my nephew. He'll be here with the van on Saturday. I'll be there too. Together, we'll be moving in no time. Thank you, I thanked him sincerely. That's very helpful. I've just started packing my tools, and I can see that I can't do it by myself. Don't rush the tools, Peregrine said. Take care of personal belongings, documents, photos, things that are really important and irreplaceable. We'll help with the rest. After talking to Peregrine, I decided to take his advice and put aside packing the tools. Instead, I went upstairs to the bedroom where the closet held photo albums, important documents, and memorabilia. The first thing I pulled out was the wedding album. Evelyn and I were married in 1977 in a small church on the outskirts of Westfield. She was so beautiful in her simple white dress with a wreath of wildflowers in her hair. I remembered every moment of that day as if it were yesterday, her shining eyes as we exchanged vows, the taste of champagne on her lips as we kissed after the ceremony, the warmth of her hand in mine as we danced our first dance. I carefully packed the album into the box, wrapping it in a soft cloth beforehand. Then I pulled out other photo albums from Aiden's birth, from our family trips, from holidays and ordinary days that were special simply because we were together. Aiden's photos evoked conflicting feelings. Here he is, a newborn, a tiny bundle in the arms of a happy Evelyn. Here's his first day of school, a smiling boy with a backpack bigger than himself. Here he is a teenager, already with a hint of the arrogance that would later become the dominant trait of his character. Here's the college graduation, Aiden in his robe and cap, diploma in hand, and Evelyn and I standing side by side, proud and happy. Somewhere in between those pictures, my son turned into a person I no longer recognized, into a man capable of discussing behind my back how to send me to a nursing home and dispose of my possessions. When did this happen? What had I done wrong? As I pondered these things, I continued to pack. Documents, letters, postcards from Evelyn, souvenirs from my travels. Everything found its place in the boxes. By evening, I felt tired, but it was a pleasant fatigue from a job well done. The important things were packed and ready to move. I made myself a simple dinner and went out with a plate on the back porch. The summer evening was warm and quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a dog was barking and crickets were chirping in the garden. I looked at my garden that I'd grown with Evelyn, at the old oak tree planted the year Aiden was born, at the workshop where I'd spent thousands of happy hours making beauty out of wood. All of this would soon become foreign, but strangely enough, the thought no longer caused pain, only a light sadness and anticipation of a new beginning. My musings were interrupted by the sound of a car pulling up. I tensed, thinking it might be Aiden returning for another confrontation, but it was my neighbor, Dorothy Pringle, an energetic widow in her 70s who lived across the street and was always up to date on neighborhood news. Silas. She called out to me as she got out of the car with a basket in her hands. I heard you're selling the house. Is it true? It's true, Dorothy, I said, coming up to meet her. I've already sold it, as a matter of fact. I'm moving next week. I can't believe it. She shook her head as she walked up the stairs. You've lived here for as long as I've known you. What's wrong? I invited her to sit down and spoke briefly about the situation with Aiden and Nancy, their attempts to control my life, and my decision to start over. Dorothy listened attentively, nodding and frowning occasionally. I'm not surprised, to be honest, she said when I finished the story. Your Aiden has always been, well, let's just say he's had a temper, and his wife's a piece of work. I saw the way they acted at Evelyn's funeral, more concerned with impressing the other guests than grieving for your poor wife. That remark surprised me. I had been so immersed in my own grief during the funeral that I hadn't paid much attention to Aiden and Nancy's behavior. But Dorothy was always observant. Anyway, she continued, I brought you a pie. I figured with the move you wouldn't have time to cook. And I also wanted to say that if you need help packing or anything else, just give me a holler. I have plenty of free time. Thank you, Dorothy. I was touched by her concern. That's very kind of you. You're welcome, she said with a wave of her hand. Neighbors are supposed to help each other. By the way, where are you moving to? Is it far from here? No, just a few miles away, I answered. A small house on Elm Street with a nice lot and an outbuilding for a workshop. Oh, that's a nice neighborhood, Dorothy nodded approvingly. Quiet, green, you'll love it. But we'll miss you here in the old neighborhood. We talked some more about the neighborhood. About the new owners of my house, Dorothy approved that it was a family with an artist daughter. About plans for the future. As she got ready to leave, I suddenly felt a rush of gratitude for this woman who had always been a kind neighbor and now showed genuine concern. You know, Dorothy, I said as I walked her to her car, I realized just now how lucky I am to have neighbors here. I'm going to miss you all. We'll miss you too, Silas, she patted my hand. But you're not going to the other side of the world. We'll see each other. After Dorothy left, I decided to continue packing, but I was distracted by the ringing of the phone. This time it was Irma Bancroft, my realtor. Mr. Hampton, she said in a businesslike tone, I have some unpleasant news. I received a call from a lawyer claiming to be your son's attorney. He was interested in the details of the transaction and hinted at a possible challenge based on your alleged incapacity. My heart sank. So Aiden wasn't bluffing. He'd actually decided to contest the sale of the house. And what did you say to him? I asked, trying to remain calm. I told him that the sale was in full compliance with the law, Irma said, that you had been medically examined before the sale, and that you were of sound mind, that the buyers have already paid the full amount, and it's virtually impossible to undo the transaction. But Mr. Hampton, I would recommend that you consult a lawyer, just in case. You're right, I agreed. I'll get right on it tomorrow. After my conversation with Irma, I sat in my chair for a long time, staring out the window and thinking about the situation. Part of me was outraged that Aiden had decided to take the case to court, but the other part felt something like pity for him. Was money so important to him that he was willing to publicly accuse his own father of having dementia? What drove him to do such a thing? These thoughts haunted me the next day as I continued packing. Now I was busy in the workshop, carefully placing the remaining tools and materials in the drawers. I paid special attention to my collection of rare woods. Each specimen was carefully wrapped and labeled. The most difficult task proved to be packing up unfinished projects. I had several works in progress. A custom red oak dresser I was making, a small purple heart jewelry box, and a special book stand I planned to give to Peregrine for his birthday. The dresser was too large to transport assembled, so I had to partially disassemble it, packing each piece carefully and labeling it so I could reassemble it in the correct order later. The jewelry box and book stand I packed whole, wrapping it with soft cloth to protect it from damage. In the evening, I received a call from another neighbor, Harold Bishop, an elderly retired teacher with whom we sometimes played chess. Silas, what's the rumor that you're selling the house? He asked without preamble. Dorothy tells everyone, but I decided to check with a source. It's true, Harold, I confirmed. The house is sold and I'm moving in next week. That's news, he exclaimed. What happened? Financial difficulties. I briefly explained the situation with Aiden and Nancy, omitting the more unpleasant details. I see, Harold said after a pause. You know, I always thought there was something wrong with your son. Forgive me for being blunt, but he's never shown you any real respect. I noticed it at Pring's barbecue a couple years ago when he made fun of your craft in front of the other guests. His words were like a punch in the gut. I didn't know Aiden had publicly mocked my work. It was painful to hear, but it also confirmed that my decision to end the toxic relationship was the right one. Anyway, Harold continued, if you need help with moving or anything else, let me know. I'm no strongman, of course, but I can help with packing or just keep you company. Thank you, Harold. I thanked him sincerely. I appreciate the offer. The next day I visited the lawyer Irma had recommended. Marcus Davenport turned out to be an experienced real estate and family law specialist. He listened carefully to my story, reviewed the house sale documents and the results of the medical exam. Mr. Hampton, he said, setting aside the papers, in my opinion, your son has no legal grounds to challenge the transaction. You own the house outright. You're legally capable, as evidenced by the medical report, and the transaction was conducted in accordance with all the rules. The only thing he could try to do is file a lawsuit to have you declared incompetent retroactively, but that would require serious medical evidence, which he simply doesn't have. So I have nothing to worry about, I clarified. In legal terms, practically no, Davenport confirmed. However, I would recommend that you be prepared for possible trouble. Your son may try to drag you into a lengthy legal battle, even if he has no chance of winning. This may be a way of pressuring you to settle and give up some of the money. I'm not going to give in to blackmail, I said firmly. In that case, we'll be ready to defend your interests in court if it comes to that. Davenport handed me a business card. Call us anytime if you have any problems. After consulting with a lawyer, I was relieved. At least legally, my position was solid. Aiden could threaten and try to intimidate me, but he had no real leverage. When I got home, I found a message from Aiden on my answering machine. His voice sounded cold and official. Dad, I talked to the lawyer. He thinks we have every reason to contest the sale of the house. Your behavior lately, especially since Mom's death, clearly indicates mental health issues. We can resolve this amicably if you agree to give Nancy and I a third of the sale price. Otherwise, we'll have to go to court. You have until tomorrow to make a decision. I erased the message, feeling a mixture of anger and frustration. Aiden didn't even try to hide the fact that he was only interested in money. No concern for my well-being, no respect for my right to control my own life and property. Just greed and manipulation. I decided not to call him back. My decision was firm. No concessions, no compromises. If he wanted to sue, let him sue. I was ready to defend my freedom and dignity to the end. I spent the rest of the day continuing to pack. By evening, most of the work was done. All that remained was to pack the essentials that I would need until the move. As I sat in the evening, in the half-empty living room, I reflected on the changes ahead. Sure, it was sad to leave the house I had lived in for so many years, but at the same time I felt a strange excitement, an anticipation of a new beginning. For the first time in a long time I could determine my own destiny, without regard to other people's expectations and demands. On Friday, Peregrine arrived to help with the final preparations for the move. We spent the day packing the rest of our belongings and discussing plans for the future. You know, Peregrine said when we took a break for lunch, I'm proud of you, Silas. Not everyone can find the strength to start over at our age, especially after being betrayed by someone so close to you. I had no choice, I replied. It was a matter of survival, literally. If I had stayed, they really would have put me in a nursing home and sold off everything I held dear. And yet, Peregrine insisted, many would have just given up. They'd let themselves be controlled, convincing themselves that it was best for everyone. You chose to fight for your freedom. That's honorable. His words warmed my soul. Perhaps he was right, and there was something honorable in what I'd done. At least I was true to myself and my principles. That evening, after Peregrine had left and I was sitting on the back porch watching the sunset, I had an unexpected visitor, Helen Garner, widow of my old friend and fellow carpenter, Frank Garner, who had died 5 years earlier. Hello, Silas, she said, coming up the stairs. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Helen. I stepped up to meet her. It's good to see you. Have a seat. Helen was an elegant woman, a little younger than I was. with kind eyes and silver hair in a neat bun. Frank and I had been close friends, often working together on large commissions. And after his death, I had tried to support Helen by helping her with repairs and other men's chores around the house. I heard about the sale of the house, she said, sitting down in the chair next to me, and about your problems with Aiden. Dorothy told everyone. I smiled. News traveled faster than light in our neighborhood. Yes, it had, I confirmed. I'm moving next week. I think you made the right decision, Helen said, looking at the sunset. You know, Frank always said that Aiden wasn't worthy of you, that he never appreciated your talent or your kindness. I was surprised. Frank never said anything like that to me. He didn't want to upset you, Helen explained, noticing my surprise. But he'd seen how Aiden treated your craft, how he ridiculed your work behind your back. Frank thought that was unforgivable. Those words hurt, but at the same time brought a strange relief. So I wasn't the only one who saw that side of Aiden's character. Other people, people whose opinions I respected, had noticed it too. Anyway, Helen continued, I've come to offer help. I have a van that was left over after Frank's store closed. If you need anything moved, just say the word. Thank you, Helen. I was touched by her offer. Peregrine has already arranged transportation, but I really appreciate your willingness to help. We talked some more about my new home and my plans for the future. Helen approved of my intention to continue carpentry and even offered to give me some of Frank's special tools that she had kept since his death. When she left, I remained sitting on the porch, looking at the stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Talking to neighbors and friends gave me confidence in my decision. Yes, I was leaving a house full of memories. Yes, I was severing ties with my only son, but I was not alone. I had people who valued me, respected my craft, and were willing to support me in times of need. Ahead was the unknown, a new chapter of life. But I met it not with fear, but with hope and determination. No matter what happened, I knew that I was doing the right thing, staying true to myself and defending my right to freedom and dignity. The day of the move was sunny and warm, as if nature itself was blessing my decision to start a new life. Peregrine arrived early in the morning with his nephew, Trent, a sturdy young man in his 30s, who brought two friends with him. With their help, loading the furniture and boxes into the rented van took only a few hours. As I stood in the driveway watching them work, I felt a strange sense of detachment. Items that just yesterday were part of my home, my life, today had become just things that needed to be moved from place to place. The furniture I'd made myself years ago, the books I'd read in the evenings with Evelyn, the dishes we'd eaten with, all seemed strangely alien now, as if they already belonged to the past. Are you ready to say goodbye to this place? Peregrine asked, coming up to me as the last of the boxes were loaded. I guess so, I replied, looking around the front of the house that had been my refuge for nearly 4 decades. Cheer. It's weird to leave like this, though, without looking back. Sometimes that's what it takes, Peregrine said philosophically. A clean break, a new beginning. I nodded, agreeing with his words. Maybe it was better that way, not to drag out the goodbyes, not to cling to the past, but just to move forward. I walked around the house one last time before I left, checking to see if I'd forgotten anything important. The bedroom Evelyn and I shared was the one I stayed in the longest. Here we'd fallen asleep and woken up together, shared our dreams and fears, loved each other. This is where she died, quietly in her sleep, holding my hand. Goodbye, Evie, I whispered, looking at the empty room. I'll remember you wherever I am. Walking out into the backyard, I walked over to the old oak tree and placed my hand on its rough trunk. It seemed important to me to say goodbye to it as well, a witness to so many happy moments in our married life. Afterward, I went into the empty workshop. All the tools, materials, and unfinished projects had already been packed and loaded into the van. Only the walls remained, soaked with the smell of wood and the memories of thousands of hours spent working. Ready? Peregrine asked, peering through the door. Ready, I nodded, taking a deep breath. We got into Peregrine's car. The van with my belongings had already left for the address of my new home under Trent's management. As I drove through the streets of Westfield, I looked out the window at familiar places that I now saw in a new way, not as a resident, but as a visitor passing through the town. My new home was on a quiet street on the outskirts of Westfield. It was a small one-story cottage with an outbuilding, surrounded by a well-kept garden. When we pulled up, the van was already parked at the gate, and Trent and his friends were waiting for us, ready to start unloading. "How do you like it?" Peregrine asked as I got out of the car and looked around at my new place. "Yes," I replied, feeling the excitement building inside me. "I love it." The house was indeed exactly what I wanted. Cozy but not cramped, with large windows overlooking the garden and a sturdy outbuilding perfect for a workshop. Inside there was a living room with a fireplace, two bedrooms, a kitchen and a bathroom. Everything a single person needs to live comfortably. Unloading and arranging the furniture took the rest of the day. By evening, the major items were in place, and I was able to assess how my old house would live in the new space. The leather couch that Nancy was so eager to throw away fit perfectly in the living room. The dining table I'd made with my own hands for my 20th wedding anniversary, with Evelyn, found its place by the window in the kitchen. Bookshelves filled with books and photos immediately made the living room feel more lived in. "It looks like you've always lived here," Peregrine remarked as we sat down for tea after a busy day. "Things fit perfectly into the space." "Yeah, it's a strange feeling," I agreed. It was as if the house had been waiting for me and my things. After the helpers left, I was alone in the new house. It was unusually quiet. No creaking of old floorboards, no rustling of oak leaves outside the window. But there was something peaceful in this silence. I was on my own territory, in my own space, and no one could dictate to me how to live. The first night in my new home, I slept soundly without dreams. In the morning, I woke up with a sense of energy and anticipation. There was so much to do. Set up the workshop, unpack the remaining boxes, tidy up the garden, get to know the neighbors. I started with the workshop. It was larger than it looked from the outside, with good natural light and solid walls. It took me a few days to set up the workbenches, place the tools, and organize the storage of materials, but the result was worth the effort. The workshop turned out to be even more comfortable than the previous one, with a more rational use of space. When the basic setup was complete, I decided to visit the local community center. Peregrine had mentioned that there was a program of adult classes there, and I thought it might be a good opportunity to meet new people and perhaps share my knowledge. The Westfield Community Center was housed in a restored historic building downtown. It was bright and airy inside, with artwork by local artists adorning the walls. I approached the information desk, where a friendly, middle-aged woman sat. "What can I do for you?" she asked with a smile. "I recently moved to the neighborhood," I began. "I wanted to find out about the programs you have available. I'm a cabinet maker with many years of experience and was wondering if I could teach some workshops or classes." "Oh, that's wonderful." The woman perked up. "We just don't have anyone teaching woodworking classes, and a lot of people are asking. I can introduce you to our program coordinator, Lucas. He's in the building right now." Within minutes, I was already talking to Lucas Reeves, an energetic young man with a genuine passion for community service. "Mr. Hampton, this is a gift." "Dash," he exclaimed when I told him about my experience. "We have long wanted to add woodworking classes to our program, but couldn't find the right instructor. How would you feel about leading weekly workshops? We could provide the space and basic materials, and participants could bring their own tools." "That sounds interesting," I agreed. "But perhaps it would be better to hold the classes in my workshop? I already have all the necessary equipment there, and I can take small groups of, say, 5 or 6 people." Lucas thought for a moment, then nodded vigorously. "Great idea. We can organize a recording and even a small fee for materials if you don't mind. It would be good for the center, for the participants, and for you." We quickly agreed on the basic terms, and within a week an ad for beginner carpentry workshops appeared on the community center bulletin board and in the local newspaper. To my surprise, the response exceeded all expectations. 8 people signed up for the first class, more than I had planned to take, but I couldn't turn anyone away. It was a diverse group: 2 retired men who wanted to learn a new hobby, a young woman who dreamed of making her own furniture, a teenager who was interested in wood carving, a school teacher looking for a way to diversify labor lessons, and 3 middle-aged women who came together, inspired by the idea of creating unique furnishings. I devoted the first class to the basics of woodworking, choosing a material, using the simplest tools, and safety. To my surprise, the time flew by quickly, and all the participants expressed their desire to continue learning. "You explained so clearly and engagingly, Mr. Hampton," a young woman, Rachel, said to me after the class. I always thought carpentry was something incredibly difficult, but you've shown that with the right approach, it's accessible to everyone. Her words warmed my soul. Perhaps this was my new calling, not just to create beautiful things out of wood, but to pass on my knowledge to others, to ignite in them the same passion for the craft that I had felt all my life. Taking classes quickly became an important part of my new life. I looked forward to every meeting with my students, rejoiced in their successes, and helped them overcome difficulties. It gave me a sense of need, a sense of importance that had been missing since Evelyn's death. However, not everything in my new life was cloudless. 2 weeks after I moved in, I got a call from Marcus Davenport, my lawyer. "Mr. Hampton," he said in a serious tone, "your son and his lawyer have filed a petition with the court. They're asking that you be declared partially incapacitated and that Aiden be appointed your financial guardian. They claim that selling the house is proof of your inability to make rational financial decisions." I felt my insides tighten. Despite Davenport's warnings and my own preparedness, the news still felt like a punch in the gut. It was one thing to know theoretically that your son could sue you, and quite another to face it in reality. "What does that mean for me?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Nothing critical at this point," Davenport replied. "The application has been accepted, but the court hasn't scheduled a hearing yet. We have time to prepare. I'd recommend an independent medical evaluation to have an up-to-date report on your mental and cognitive state." I agreed, and the very next week I was examined by two independent specialists, a neurologist and a psychiatrist. Both concluded that I was fully competent, with intact cognitive functions, and no signs of dementia or other conditions that could affect my decision-making ability. "That's good news," Davenport said as I handed him the findings. "Now we need to gather testimony from people who interact with you on a regular basis and can attest to your capacity. Neighbors, friends, perhaps students from your workshops." Gathering testimony was an unexpectedly moving process. People I'd known for years and those I'd only recently met expressed genuine outrage at Aiden's attempts to control my life and a willingness to support me in court. "Silas has more sense than most people half his age," said Dorothy Pringle, my former neighbor, "and certainly more sensible than his son, who only thinks about money." Peregrine, Helen Garner, Harold Bishop, Lucas from the community center, and my new students all signed written statements attesting to my clarity of mind and ability to make informed decisions. The date for the court hearing was set for mid-September, and as it approached, I felt a growing tension. Not fear of losing. Legally, my position was solid. Rather, it was fear of public humiliation, of having to expose our family drama, of hearing my own son call me a feeble-minded old man. "Don't worry so much, Mr. Hampton," Davenport said, noticing my anxiety during one of the preparatory meetings. "Judge Mackenzie, to whom your case is assigned, is known for his common sense and rejection of frivolous lawsuits. I am confident that he will see your son's true motivation." I tried to distract myself from thoughts of the upcoming trial by immersing myself in my work. The workshop in the new house was now fully functional, and I returned to the unfinished projects I had brought with me. The red oak dresser was almost finished, just needing a final finish. The purple heart casket I completed and presented to Rachel, my most diligent student, in appreciation for her enthusiasm. The bookstand for Peregrine was also finished, and my friend was thrilled with the gift. I also began a new project, a set of chess pieces in contrasting woods for Harold Bishop, with whom we resumed our chess games. Working on miniature pieces required total concentration and left no room for anxious thoughts. My master classes flourished as well. The original group of 8 had fully completed the basic course and moved on to more challenging projects. A second group for beginners formed, and I was now running classes twice a week. Seeing people discover the joy of working with wood, seeing their eyes light up when a simple piece of wood was used to create something beautiful and functional, it gave me a deep sense of satisfaction. One evening, after a particularly successful class, when all the students had left and I was cleaning up the workshop, the doorbell rang. On the threshold stood an unfamiliar woman in her 50s, with a pleasant, open face and a determined look. "Mr. Hampton?" she asked. "My name is Olivia Baird. I'm the editor of the New England Craftsman magazine and would like to talk to you about the possibility of writing an article about your workshops and your approach to carpentry." I was surprised and a little confused by this offer. Why specifically about me? I asked, inviting her in. I don't do anything special, I just share what I know. That's why, she smiled. A lot of young craftsmen nowadays are into new technologies, power tools, computer modeling, and you represent the traditional approach, working with your hands, understanding the material. This is unique and valuable. Plus, Lucas from the community center told me how successful your classes are. People are really interested. I agreed to the interview, although the idea of being the center of attention seemed a little strange to me. Olivia spent several hours in my workshop asking about my experience, my woodworking philosophy, and my approach to teaching. She also took some photos of me at work and of my finished pieces. The article will be in the next issue in 2 weeks, she said as she left. I will send you a copy of the magazine. I didn't pay much attention to this conversation, but when the article came out, the repercussions exceeded all expectations. The phone started ringing off the hook. People from all over New England wanted to sign up for my workshops, order pieces, just to chat and share their woodworking experiences. Lucas from the community center called with a proposal to expand the program. Silas, after this article, we have a line of people who want to attend your classes. Maybe we should think about special workshops for advanced students, or workshops on specific techniques. I was stunned by such attention, but at the same time felt a strange excitement. Perhaps this was a chance to create something truly meaningful. Not just workshops for a handful of enthusiasts, but an entire program of traditional carpentry education that could preserve and pass on the knowledge and techniques accumulated by generations of craftsmen. In all the hustle and bustle, I had almost forgotten about the upcoming trial. I was reminded by a call from Davenport the day before the hearing. Mr. Hampton, we're meeting at the courthouse tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Wear something conservative but comfortable. And don't worry, we have a very strong case. I couldn't sleep for a long time that night, thinking about my upcoming meeting with Aiden. We hadn't seen or spoken since the day he and Nancy left my old house. How would I feel when I saw him again? Anger? Disappointment? Or maybe a remnant of that fatherly love that, despite everything, had never left my heart? In the morning, I put on my best suit, the one I had once worn to see Evelyn off. It was a little loose. I'd lost weight in the last few months, but it still looked dignified. Peregrine insisted on driving me to the courthouse and being there for me during the hearing. I'm not going to let you go through this alone, he said firmly. Friends are exactly what you need at times like this. The Westfield Courthouse was an imposing red brick structure with columns at the entrance. Inside, it smelled of wood polish and old papers. Davenport was waiting for us in the lobby, looking confident and collected. Ready? He asked, shaking my hand. Remember what we discussed. Answer honestly but briefly. Don't be provoked by your son's lawyer. Don't show aggression or irritation, no matter what is said. I nodded, feeling my throat go dry. We headed toward the courtroom, and in the hallway I saw them, Aiden and Nancy. My son looked tense and tired, with a shadow of stubble on his face and bags under his eyes. Nancy, standing next to him, was impeccably dressed and combed, but her face expressed a mixture of arrogance and nervousness. Our gazes met, and for a moment I thought I saw something like doubt or even shame in Aiden's eyes. But that impression faded quickly, replaced by cold determination. Let's go, Davenport said quietly, guiding me toward the courtroom doors. The hearing was about to begin. It had been a snowy winter in Westfield, but my new home was warm and cozy. I sat in a chair by the fireplace, watching the flames dance among the logs, and thought about how much my life had changed in the last 6 months. The lawsuit Aiden had brought against me had ended in late September with a complete defeat. Judge Mackenzie, an elderly but sharp-tongued man with a discerning eye, listened carefully to all the arguments of the parties and delivered a verdict that left no room for ambiguity. The court finds absolutely no basis for finding Mr. Hampton even partially incapacitated, he said, looking over his glasses at Aiden and his attorney. Chapeau. Moreover, the evidence presented shows that Mr. Hampton is in excellent mental and cognitive condition, has an active social life, and is successfully passing on his professional knowledge to a new generation. Selling his own home to purchase a home more suited to his current needs is a rational decision and not a sign of dementia. Aiden's face at that moment was a mixture of shock, disappointment, and poorly concealed anger. Nancy, sitting next to him, turned pale and pressed her lips into a thin line. Their lawyer was helplessly going through the papers, as if hoping to find some argument there that might change the judge's decision, but it was obvious that the case was lost. After the hearing was over, as we were leaving the courtroom, Aiden tried to approach me. His face was no longer angry. It was more like confusion and something akin to remorse. "Dad," he started hesitantly, "maybe we should talk." "Ye," but I shook my head. "I don't think we have anything else to talk about, Aiden. You've made your choice. I've made mine. Now we'll go our separate ways." Those were the last words I said to my son. He tried to contact me a few more times, calling, leaving messages, even sending me a letter. But I didn't answer. Not out of revenge or vindictiveness, but because I realized that our relationship could not be restored. Too much had been said and done. The wound of betrayal was too deep. Since then, 6 months have passed, and my life has not just gotten better, it has blossomed, filled with new meanings, new people, new joys. The master classes in carpentry, which I started to teach almost immediately after the move, turned into a real school of traditional woodworking craft. After an article in the New England Craftsman magazine, I had students not only from Westfield, but also from neighboring towns. I rented additional space at the community center, purchased tools and materials with the money from the sale of my house, and organized regular classes at various levels, from basic for beginners to advanced for those who had already learned the basics. My favorite course was Restoration of Antique Furniture, a subject in which I felt particularly confident due to my years of experience. It was in this class that I met Eleanor Price, a graceful woman of 65 with intelligent eyes and gray hair gathered in a simple but elegant bun. Eleanor had come to the course with a specific goal in mind: to learn how to restore an antique secretaire she had inherited from her grandmother. Unlike most beginners, she wasn't afraid of tools, confidently holding a planer and chisel as if she had been working with them all her life. "My father was a cabinet maker," she explained, noticing my surprise. "I grew up watching him work, and I even helped him as a child. But then life took a different path. University, career, family. Only now retired have I decided to return to something I've always loved." Eleanor turned out to be a retired art history professor who specialized in decorative arts. Her knowledge of historical furniture styles, techniques, and materials from different eras was encyclopedic. We often stayed after class to discuss the peculiarities of Victorian carving or the secrets of shellac polishing used by 18th century craftsmen. Gradually, our conversations went beyond carpentry. We talked about books, music, traveling, shared memories and dreams. I told her about my life with Evelyn, my conflict with Aiden, how I had decided to start over at my age. She shared the story of her marriage that ended 10 years ago after her husband left her for a young coworker, of her grown children living in different parts of the country, of learning to live alone and find joy in the simple things. At some point, our friendship began to grow into something more. I wasn't looking for a romantic relationship and was sure that part of my life ended with Evelyn's death. But feelings for Eleanor arose naturally and unexpectedly, like spring flowers breaking through the snow. I found myself looking forward to our meetings, that the day seemed incomplete without hearing her voice, without seeing her smile. Eleanor seemed to have similar feelings. Once, when we were working together to restore her secretary in my home workshop, she froze as she watched me carefully select a shade of stain for a damaged section of wood. "Silas," she said quietly, "did you ever think you could love again?" "After Evelyn?" I set the brush aside and looked at her. There was vulnerability and hope in her eyes. "I'd never thought about it," I answered honestly. "Not until recently. Our relationship had evolved slowly, without rush or pressure. We'd both lived long lives, both experienced loss and disappointment, both valued independence and privacy. But at the same time, we felt so good together, so comfortable and natural, as if we had known each other all our lives. By spring, Eleanor began to spend more and more time at my place. We worked together in the studio, cooked dinners, listened to old jazz records from my collection, and discussed plans for the future. Her presence filled my home with a warmth and life that had been sorely lacking since Evelyn's death. But it wasn't just about personal happiness. My professional life, too, had reached a new bloom. The carpentry school I had created was becoming more and more famous. I was consulted, invited to speak at craft exhibitions, asked to evaluate antique furniture. And then one morning, as Eleanor and I were having breakfast on the veranda, enjoying the first really warm days, the phone rang. It was Amelia Brighton, director of the Westfield Historical Museum. So, Mr. Hampton, she said after formal greetings, our museum has received a grant to restore a collection of colonial furniture. These are 16 pieces from the 17th and 18th centuries in need of varying degrees of restoration. We would like to invite you to lead this project. Your reputation as a master restorer, working with traditional methods, makes you an ideal candidate. I was stunned. Restoring historic furniture for a museum was my dream job, something I had been striving for all my professional life. The opportunity to touch history, to breathe new life into objects created by master craftsmen of past centuries, to pass on my knowledge and experience while working on something truly meaningful. It's a great honor, Miss Brighton, I said, trying to hide the excitement in my voice. I would be happy to take on this project. We arranged to meet the next day to discuss the details. When I hung up the phone, Eleanor was looking at me with a smile. From the look on your face, it's something important, she said. I told her about the museum's offer, and she was genuinely happy for me. This is the perfect job for you, Silas. You're not just restoring these objects. You're preserving a piece of history for future generations. The project was indeed a massive and exciting endeavor. The collection ranged from a simple colonial table and chairs to an exquisite bookcase by one of the first American cabinet makers. Some pieces required minimal intervention, cleaning, light repairs, restoring finishes. Others needed major restoration, replacing lost parts, strengthening the structure, restoring inlay. I decided to turn this project into an educational program. With the museum's permission, I enlisted the most talented students from my school. Under my guidance, they gained invaluable experience working with historic furniture, learned the techniques and materials of past centuries, and learned to treat artifacts with respect and sensitivity. Eleanor also joined the project as a historical styles consultant. Her expert knowledge helped us recreate lost elements in perfect harmony with the original, choosing the right materials and techniques for each era. Working on the museum collection was the centerpiece of my new life, but not the only one. A real community formed around me. Students, colleagues, friends united by their love of woodworking and respect for traditional craftsmanship. We gathered regularly not only for classes, but also for informal meetings where we shared experiences, discussed projects, and simply enjoyed the company of like-minded people. Peregrine joked that I had created a carpentry sect, but there was some truth to his words. In a world where speed and efficiency are increasingly valued, where machine production is replacing manual labor, we were keepers of tradition, appreciators of the slow, thoughtful process of making things that can last for generations. One warm May evening, Eleanor and I were sitting in the backyard of my house. A small fire crackled nearby, over which we were roasting marshmallows, a childhood pastime we both loved for some reason. Her daughter Lydia and her husband and 6-year-old twins were visiting the house. They'd come up from Boston for the weekend. The children had spent the day helping me in the workshop and were now asleep, exhausted by their new experiences in the fresh air. You know, Eleanor said, looking at the fire, when I divorced Richard, I thought the best part of my life was over, that there was only loneliness and fading away ahead. How wrong I was. I took her hand. I felt the same way after Evelyn died. And then when things with Aiden started to go wrong, it felt like everything was finally falling apart. I never thought that at my age you could start over and be so happy. Eleanor squeezed my hand in return. Do you think you'll ever make up with Aiden? She asked quietly. I wondered. After the trial, Aiden had tried several times to get in touch. He'd called, left messages, even sent a Christmas card. In the last letter he'd received a month ago, he'd written that he'd broken up with Nancy, that he'd rethought a lot of things, that he wanted to apologize and rebuild the relationship. I don't know, I answered honestly. I don't feel anger or resentment toward him anymore. But there's no trust either. He hadn't betrayed me in a moment of weakness or a mistake. He'd been methodically planning to take control of my life, to dispose of my possessions, to throw away everything I cared about. And he'd been doing it for months with cold calculation. How could I let a man like that back into my life, even if he was my son? Eleanor nodded understandingly. Sometimes a relationship just can't be repaired, no matter how painful it is. And at times like that, you have to have the courage to let go, not cling to the illusion of family ties. She was right. The last 6 months have taught me that a real family is not necessarily people bound by blood ties. Family is those who respect your boundaries, appreciate your talents, support you in times of need, and share your joy in times of happiness. Peregrine, who has become my closest friend. Students who absorb my knowledge with genuine interest. Eleanor, who has brought new love and understanding into my life. Her daughter and grandchildren, who accepted me with open hearts. Even Dorothy, Harold, and other neighbors who supported me during my conflict with my son, all became my new family, created not by the compulsion of birth, but by the free choice of my heart. The next morning, as Eleanor and I ate breakfast on the veranda, and her grandchildren played noisily in the garden, the letter carrier delivered a small package. The sender was Aiden. Inside was an old photograph in a simple wooden frame. Me, young, with little Aiden on my shoulders, both smiling at the camera against the backdrop of our old house. Attached to the photo was a note. Dad, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I hope someday you can think of me as a son again. Aiden and I stared at the photo for a long time, remembering that day. Aiden was about 5. We had just finished building a birdhouse, his first carpentry project. He was so proud of his work, so happy at my praise. Somewhere along the way, from that enthusiastic boy to calculating adult, something had gone wrong. Some important lessons had not been learned. Some values had not been passed on. Eleanor came over quietly and put her hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked with concern. I nodded, carefully packing the photograph back into the box. "Yeah, I'm fine. It's just a reminder of the past." "So what are you going to do about it?" I looked at the children playing in the garden, at their carefree smiles, at the joy of discovering the world shining in their eyes. Then I looked at my new home, at the workshop where unfinished projects and new ideas were waiting, at Eleanor, whose presence filled my life with warmth and meaning. "I'll move on," I answered, dash my life, without regard for the past. I hadn't sent a reply to Aiden, not out of revenge or a desire to hurt, but because I realized that sometimes the healthiest way to solve a problem was to admit that it was unsolvable. Some bridges are burned forever, and instead of trying in vain to rebuild them, it's better to put energy into building new paths, new connections, new lives. And my new life was good. Work on the museum collection was progressing well, each day bringing the satisfaction of returning historic objects to their original beauty. The carpentry school was thriving, attracting more and more students eager to learn the ancient art of woodworking. My relationship with Eleanor deepened and strengthened, based on mutual respect, common interests, and a quiet, mature love that didn't need loud words or dramatic gestures. On the last day of spring, Eleanor and I sat in my workshop. She was helping me with a particularly difficult piece of inlay work for the Museum Bureau, a delicate job requiring good eyesight and a steady hand. A warm rain was falling outside the window, filling the air with freshness and the smell of wet earth. A jazz tune was blasting from the old radio, providing a cozy backdrop for our work. "Silas," Eleanor said suddenly, setting the instrument aside, "I've been thinking about the future, our future." I looked up from my work, watching her intently. "What did you have in mind?" "I love you," she said simply, "and I don't want to live apart anymore. We could combine our lives not necessarily in a traditional marriage, but as partners, companions, best friends. What do you say?" I felt my heart fill with warmth. There was nothing unexpected in her proposal. We were moving toward this naturally, without haste or pressure. And yet, to hear those words, to realize that at 68 years old, life can give you such a chance to start all over again with a man who understands and appreciates you. "I love you too," I said, taking her hand, "and I want nothing more than to spend the rest of my years with you." She smiled and tears of joy glistened in her eyes. We sat like that for a while, holding hands, not needing words to express what we felt. Outside the window, the rain began to subside, and the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, filling the studio with golden light. I thought about the incredible journey I had traveled over the past year, from deep grief and despair, from betrayal and loss, to a new life full of meaning, creativity, and love. From soul-destroying toxic relationships to healthy connections based on mutual respect and shared values. Selling the house, which at first seemed like such a dramatic, painful decision, was actually the first step toward liberation. Not only from physical walls, but also from the emotional shackles of the past, from imposed roles and expectations, from the sense of duty that often substitutes for true love. I found my place in the world, not as someone's father or husband, not as a guardian of family traditions or a caretaker of the family nest, but as an independent person, a master of my craft, a person capable of giving and receiving love, sharing knowledge, creating beauty, building new relationships and connections. And this was the main wisdom that I found on the slope of years. It is never too late to start again. It is never too late to defend your right to happiness and self-determination. It is never too late to choose freedom, even if you have to leave behind what once seemed to be the unshakable basis of your existence. What are you thinking about? Eleanor asked, noticing my pensive look. Soderhartsanidus, that life is full of surprises, I answered, and that sometimes you have to lose everything to gain something more valuable. She nodded understandingly and squeezed my hand. We went back to work, and the room was filled with the soft sound of sandpaper sliding over wood, a soothing, meditative sound that spoke of patience, craftsmanship, and transformation. Outside the workshop window, my new garden spread out, smaller than the previous one, but more tended and thoughtful. In the corner of the courtyard, I planted a young oak tree, not in memory of the past, but as a symbol of the future, which I will never see again, but which will grow and grow stronger, like the knowledge I pass on to my students, like the love I give and receive in return. Life went on, opening new horizons, giving new opportunities, and I was ready to accept them with an open heart, without looking back, without regretting what was left in the past. There was so much to look forward to: the completion of the museum project, the expansion of the school, the trip to Europe that Eleanor and I had planned for the fall, her grandchildren who wanted to learn how to make birdhouses, new students eager to learn the secrets of the ancient craft. I smiled at my thoughts and focused on the piece of mahogany in my hands. Under my fingers, it gradually took shape and beauty, just like my life, which, like a good wine, only got better with age.